Kinsey Schofield, a very good morning to you.
I mean, conveniently, JK, I
Yeah.
do have a tiara. If this is how you want to start the new breakfast show, I have a tiara at my beck and call always, and I'm ready to go. It's a new year, new me.
Madam, the Duchess of California, welcome to the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. It's called a tiara, not a tiara. Tiara.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's so Meghan Markle of me.
I mean, honestly, if you want to join the British royal family, can you damn well speak properly first? Tiara. No, Meghan.
Tiara. I will take my tiara off if we get serious, though, because I am a respectable journalist.
Yeah, take it off. Welcome. How was Christmas? Happy New Year. Everything good?
It was. Thanks for asking. It's great to see you. And I love all the beautiful new graphics for your breakfast show. Congratulations.
Thank you, my darling. Two big stories. And this is something that you and we were talking at 3 o'clock this morning, but that's another story. Prince Harry set to regain his automatic armed security in the UK. How?
Well, first of all, I'd love your reaction to this because you're going to be paying for this. According to sources close to the Sussexes, Prince Harry won his fight for his round-the-clock security detail to be restored, which means the UK taxpayers would cover the costs of Harry's security again.
How has he won it? Who's made that decision? Do we know?
So the reinstatement of armed security, this was assured after a fresh risk assessment was carried out by Ravik. A source told the Daily Mail it's now a formality. The Home Office has indicated that security is now nailed on for Harry. And this is kind of silly because we've talked about this for years now, you and I, how really, all he had to do was give them 30 days notice, and the likelihood that he'd get the security that he wants, which is armed security, is pretty high. But the fact that it's automatic, it's just frustrating to, I imagine to someone like me that covers him. When you look at the amount of time he spends in the UK and what his objectives are since Megxit when he's there, JK, the majority of the time that he's there, he's suing somebody. He's in a court. He's in a courtroom. He's fighting with somebody. If I'm a British taxpayer, I don't like the fact that my money is going towards Harry pitching a fit and moaning in another courtroom.
Listen, I couldn't agree more. And I think you're there, we're here. It's hard enough for people in this country right now for all sorts of reasons that I won't bore you about. High taxation, a government that seems to favour anybody who shouldn't be here over people who have been here all their lives. And I think, for me, as a royalist, this will result in more justifiable kicking of the royal family, because what this says is you can leave this country, slag off the thing that sustains you, and then at some point click your fingers and expect us, a country that's skint, to pay for you when you deign us with your attention. But then there's another story about Harry and Meghan. He is desperate. Now, I read at the weekend that, or maybe at the back end of last week, that William and Charles are going separately to the United States at some point next year to shore up. She's very excited about this. She could meet William. Maybe you could steal him off Catherine.
No, I would never do that.
Oh, do me a favour. If he said, Kinsey, I'm ditching, will you come with me? Are you saying you wouldn't, Duchess of...
Am I more of a Queen Camilla or more of a Catherine? I'm more of a Catherine. I'm not, no offence to Queen Camilla, but I'm not a side piece, okay?
I love you so much. I love it. I'm not a side piece. Anyway, back to the main story that we were talking about. They're going, I don't know if they're going together or separately, but Prince Harry has made no secret of the fact that he would like Charles to meet his grandchildren in 26. I think he hasn't seen them since 2022. And I said to you in the car earlier, and I just want you to repeat what you said because I think it's relevant. You sort of heard rumours about this is getting better and their relationship's improving. William won't be happy about this at all, will he?
Yeah, Project Thaw, give me a break. I don't believe in Project Thaw. I believe that was a campaign created by Meredith Maines, who no longer works for the Sussexes. So I'm curious to see if that narrative continues throughout 2026 with her no longer there. We read in the Times over the weekend, Kate Manzi reporting that William and Catherine are not in contact with Prince Harry. They have no desire to be in contact with Prince Harry. So very unlikely for the Wales family to reconnect with him in 2026, in my opinion. And also, like, Harry, if your security's been reinstated, then get your butt on an airplane with your kids and your wife and come to the United Kingdom. You don't need King Charles to go to you in Montecito. Just another example of his entitlement.
And I think also, and I think that's the best point that you could ever have made. If you're arguing for that, what's the point of it? I think that William has very strong feelings about how his brother has treated not only the monarchy but the history of everything, and I don't think that will ever be repaired. I'm sure his dad, it's his son, blah, blah, blah. But I do believe there is real sense within the royal household that whatever happens with that boy tends to be in the newspapers almost even before it happens. And that quick meeting at Clarence House, there was lots of stuff put out there. So I think there'd be real reticence to take him at face value. But yeah, why should our king with cancer go to Montecito? Can you imagine him in Montecito at her house? Sitting at the kitchen
at
table.
A Whole Foods market, King Charles walking around a Whole Foods market with Rob Lowe. I'm not seeing him. Katy Perry. No, I don't see it.
I'd like to say that obviously I would never assume that you'd be anybody's piece on the side, but I would love to see you in the royal family because I actually genuinely believe that you're more royalist than anybody I've ever met, which we love. And thank you, by the way, my darling, for staying up late. What time is it in LA?
It is 11:55 p.m.
Are you off to bed?
I'm going to bed.
You have a lovely time, and I'll see you soon, yo. Where do we start? We can only start in one position. Yesterday, BBC Laura Kunsberg, our embattled Prime Minister, delivered the line that has struck even more of a chill into people than you're feeling, which is he says he'll be here in 12 months. He says that it doesn't matter. He knows it's hard for Brits, but things are about to turn and things are going to improve. What's yours and the Tories' response to that?
Well, the problem is things have already turned. He's had 18 months and he's took us entirely the wrong way. When this government came to office, we had the fastest growing economy in the G7. We've now got the slowest. We had near record levels of employment. We've now got 21% more people unemployed. There were some devastating stories in the newspapers at the weekend about young people and the job opportunities, the Saturday jobs that they can't get anymore, the graduate jobs that all these youngsters have gone off to university to train for. There's none of them left either. Nothing's going on because anybody in this country who creates jobs is on the move. They're terrified to create jobs. The reality is what this government is doing to our economy is costing jobs, it's driving up prices, and it is causing anybody who wants to run a business to flee. It's terrifying, actually, what they're doing.
I think it's
real
quite interesting
for people out there who are trying to make ends meet.
I think you're right to go down that line, and we've sat here today and talked about, his own MPs are plotting because, the hard left want him to condemn what Trump's done in Venezuela, and we can talk about that. Will he survive the May elections? But somebody said to me something really interesting over the holidays about how the Labour Party was always, Labour was about the working person. And there's no doubt that working people and people who have struggled to succeed or run a business have been absolutely screwed under this 18-month government. And actually those very people that were probably the heartbeat of Labour have abandoned them in droves. Whether they've gone to the right or the left, that's it. And he seems to be... I mean, let's take Venezuela. Half of his party is saying, because they're all Chavez red flag flying socialists, they're all saying he should condemn it. And I said it earlier, I don't think I've ever supported them more. When Diane Abbott yesterday said, and I quote, you've based your entire career on being a supporter of international law, you're a human rights lawyer, you're a bloody hypocrite.
Pick your poison with these guys. The reality is that this was a brutal, oppressive regime, illegitimate regime. He held an election, didn't get the result he wanted, carried on anyway, to the point he did so much damage to that country that 8 million people left. Yeah. It's bad here, but crikey, 8 million people up sticks and left Venezuela.
But did he have a right to go in there? Do you and the Tory party believe that the reason that he's given about fentanyl and drugs is justification? And Nigel Farage said he's broken international law. Do you believe it's justification for what happened?
I think we've got to ask the Americans. Well, the opportunity would be there for the Americans to put the case forward. I'm sure they're going to do that. I'm sure there are people who would criticise Trump no matter what he did. Anyway, before we even start, you heard the loony lefties of the Labour Party. The reality is that the Americans are our biggest partner, whether it's defence, whether it's security, whether it's intelligence, whether it's trade. They share our values, they share our interests on the globe and the outlook there. It's right that the questions will be asked. It's right that the USA will have to put the case forward and answer those questions. And it's right that this brutal dictator is finally being held to account for the things that he's done to those people in Venezuela.
But you see, I mean, I'm not against you. I agree with you. But when you describe them as our partner and that special relationship, I don't mean to be rude, Starmer had no idea at all. He had absolutely no idea. I mean, there's this great story there's an article in The Sun, I think page 12, from Rod Liddell, and he says, can you imagine, like, they're in the American Situation Room and the general's going, we are ready to go, Mr. President, do you give anything? And suddenly somebody goes, no, we haven't rung Sir Keir, and they all laugh. And somebody, he'd be at home in his Mr. Men pyjamas. I mean, I get wound up about, you know, what happens domestically, but internationally, this special relationship, look how he treated him when he dissed him on stage that time. We are a laughing stock, and still further with this, we knew nothing about this. That's the point, Matt, isn't it?
I mean, you couldn't have a less inspiring guy at the helm of this country. The guy is so drab, it's unreal. He's got no backbone. He can't even stand up to his own backbenchers. Whenever we send this guy abroad, you don't worry about the cost of his travel. You worry about whatever he's going to give away whilst he's there. He's always at the wrong end of the negotiating table. Whether it's giving away 12 years of fishing rights to the EU, whether it's giving away we're voting on it again this week, Chagos, and the huge cost of that. This guy just seems to go away, dole it out willy-nilly, and everybody else is forced to pick up the tab. It's a disaster. But there is no wonder, when we look at him, how much respect the people of Britain have for him, how much respect do we expect people across the globe, world leaders, to have for this man who is destroying our economy and destroying our country. Now,
the one thing I do want to put, I put this to Richard Tice, I want to put it to you, and I'm going to play you a clip. One of the things that has absolutely infuriated our viewers and listeners this morning is he's been accused of plotting a full-scale Brexit betrayal. Watch this with Laura Kuensberg. This is Keir Starmer yesterday about betrayal.
Steps.
But what's next?
We've already taken steps on food and agriculture to align with the single market. That's the sovereign decision that we have taken. I think we should get closer, and if it's in our national interest, in our interest, to have even closer alignment with the single market, then we should consider that. We should go that far.
What's yours and the Tory party's view of what seems to be a government, again, saying to 52% of people who voted to leave Brexit, shove your opinion, I'm going my own way?
It's another broken promise. He broke his promises to our farmers. He broke his promises to our pensioners. He broke his promises to all of us on council tax. He said not a penny more. And up it went. It's another broken promise from the Labour Party. He told us he wouldn't do this in his manifesto, but it's just another distraction as well. This guy wants to blame anybody but himself and Rachel Reeves for the damage that he's doing to our country and our economy. All those people out of work, young people, opportunities closed off to them, businesses absolutely battered by his business rates increases, by his jobs tax, and by the red tape that's spiralling out of control as a result of his employment rights bill. It's his fault. He can't blame anybody else. Blame it on the EU all you want. Blame it on Brexit all you want. The reality is, the reason our economy is in the state it is because of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' decisions.
Yeah, I think most people listening, just finally, as the Shadow Home Office Minister, your latest title for 2026, he's got so many, ladies and gentlemen, this sort of wound up a lot of people this morning. We're approaching 70,000 illegal migrants that have come into this country since Starmer took power. Migrants can have their mobile phones and SIM cards seized from today without the need for arrest under laws fighting people smugglers. Border Force, immigration and police officers will be able to confiscate and search phones and other electronic devices. Most people texting and saying, why has it taken so long? But there's real cynicism, Matt. This will make you smile. People think they're taking the migrants' phones to give them back with a free upgrade. What's the Tory party's response to that?
So the reality is that this migration crisis under this government has got, not a little bit worse, it's got a hell of a lot worse.
Yes.
The number arriving over the last 18 months, if you take it and compare it to the 18 months of the last government, it's gone up 50%. That is huge. And when it comes down to these phones, there was already legislation in place that would have allowed us to take phones, to seize such devices, but it was linked to an obligation on the Home Secretary to remove people who come here illegally. All of this is tinkering around the edges. It could already be done. The reality is people who break into this country, people who enter illegally, cannot be allowed to stay. Everybody at home knows that is the common sense way to solve this. Until we start doing that, people are going to continue to arrive in ever-increasing numbers. The only way to do it is to remove people who break into this country.
Mate, it's always a pleasure. Now you're going to come in and do the papers later in the week. Do you realise that you're the first person to do an interview with me from Westminster without people with placards behind you? Do you know why that is? Because it's too bloody cold, which sums up exactly what those sort of protesters are. They're all at home. I don't want to put my banner up today. There's the sort of lady, I'm going to call her the first lady of football. Yesterday, the breaking news that Ruben Amorim was sacked as Manchester United's head coach, not manager, after 14 months. Rumours that he's earned about 20 million quid. You can go and get, you know, a Cantona or a Brian Robson. No. Massive Man United fan, former Lioness, the best in the business. Leanne Sanderson, good morning.
Morning, Jeremy. I like that title, First Lady of Football. I'm liking it. I might have to stick to that.
What did you say to me when I rang you up last night? What you ringing me on this number for? Where'd you get that number from? What are you ringing me on this number for?
Yeah, I know.
You gave it to me, Sanderson. What's the matter with you now? What's going on? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Lovely to see you as always.
And you, my darling. It dominated on a really strange day. Everybody seemed to be sacked yesterday. The Celtic manager, I could have told you that, Nancy, he's gone. Obviously, we had Enzo Maresca. But yesterday, Ruben Amorim, 14 months into a 3-year project under Ineos, Sir Jim Radcliffe, shown the door. You could see it coming. What I thought was really interesting was, did you see the photographs or the footage of him and his wife going out for a stroll in Cheshire after he got binned?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude, because it's your club. What an appalling decision that turned out to be, employing him in the first place.
Do you know what, Jeremy? I actually like Ruben and I actually feel really disappointed. I think it was inevitable when you start falling out with your employers and coming out after the Leeds game, saying what he did in the press conference. The last few months, I've been in a lot of his press conferences, and it's similar to when, you know, when a president becomes a president, you see them 4 years later, they look completely dishevelled, more tired, more grey. And Ruben, when he took over the job, looked fresh-faced. And now look at him. I mean, when he was out walking his dog, last night with his wife, I was like, you know, he looks like a man that's been relieved of a lot of stress. And obviously it does help. He's going to get a £10 million payout. But that's the reality of this situation. When you get sacked, that's not his fault. But I think, I say it all the time, Jeremy, the common denominator is the football club. You can't keep sacking these managers over and over again. The players are nowhere near good enough. We are in sick, but I don't think the Premier League has been anywhere near the levels it has in previous years anyway. But, like, he was almost doomed from when he first got there. I think he's honest and open in his press conferences and when he's talking. But inevitably now, why did they not just get rid of him over the Christmas period? Like, I heard there was some type of argument on Friday. But for me, since Ineos has taken over and Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox, like, it hasn't worked out. So people
Why don't football clubs, right? Take Chelsea. All my family support bloody Chelsea. They've got 400 18-year-olds worth however much money. Is it not right to say, and we ain't got much time, darling, and I really appreciate it coming on, is that football is now looked on as a business? There's too many structures. The old-fashioned manager, Alex Ferguson, Mourinho when he started, Harry Redknapp, the success, Don Revie, all those sort of people, they were in charge and they had success. They had time, right?
Yeah, you've only got to look at Martin O'Neill going back at Celtic. You know, this is a man that hadn't been in managerial, like, for a long time. Goes to Celtic. He hasn't done... It's not rocket science. He's allowed the players to play, let them be themselves. I think, you know, football now, footballers, they're too mollycoddled for me. I played for a lot of managers. I didn't like their tactics, but you have to get on with it. It's your job.
Our next guest, the next Mayor of London, if I have anything to do with it, Reform's Layla Cunningham. Layla, good morning.
Hi, Jeremy, how are you?
The woman who makes me look like I can't do childcare. You've probably been up since about 3 a.m, haven't you?
No, my kids are teenagers, Jeremy. You know, they're very, they wake up late, take themselves to school, very independent.
Oh, I wish I got to that point. Mine don't. But as my wife said the other day, when I finish changing Iris's nappy, I'll end up be doing yours next. That'll be the next thing. Layla,
how old are yours again?
So, 35, 22, 20, 16, 5 and 2.
Wow.
All right, don't start. Listen, it's a different show. Can I just get your response very quickly to that story in Crowborough? This came out as a story in The Sun today, Layla. Unbelievable. Thousands of pounds to be spent by the local council updating old CCTV cameras. They're going to be throughout the town of Crowborough, where, of course, 600 migrants, illegal unvetted men, are about to be housed in that ex-cadet sort of training camp. The people up in arms, because that would tell us, forget surveillance state, I agree with the headline, but that would tell us categorically, right, that they expect trouble, right?
Not even that. I met a lovely couple from Crowborough who've been protesting every single weekend because of that. They used to live in London and they went to live there because they wanted to be off grid. It wanted to be quiet. Everyone knows everyone. It's a lovely town. It's a lovely village. There's no problems, no trouble. And she said she heard this. She said that in the Saturday market, the police were giving away rape alarms. She'd heard it in anticipation of this occurring, and she's absolutely furious. Her home, her town, the way of life is going to completely change. And like your previous guest said, who is our government prioritizing?
Yeah. I mean, with Epping, when they took the local council to court and said that the rights of, illegal migrants were more important to them as a government than the rights of an indigenous population, you're in trouble. And of course, it's a subject that so many people, we can't say that. Well, we can say that. A reform government will say that. A reform government will detain and deport. We've had that discussion on numerous occasions. And how can... It's really interesting to me, and you and I have talked privately, but the way that people say that, detain and deport, you couldn't even mention the word immigration 10 years ago. I believe millions of people have got to a point where they're going, enough is enough, because you're taking the mickey out of us now. You're making us feel unsafe.
You're overriding our rights, and they won't even call it illegal migration, Jeremy. They'll call it irregular. Call it what it is. I argue with people from the Labour side all the time, and they're like, they're not illegal migrants, they're asylum seekers. So they don't even recognise that the men coming here are illegal and shouldn't be here. That's the thing.
I remember Newsnight last year, Darren Jones going, 90% of them are women and children. The guy's he's obviously blind. It is not women and children. It is young men with no documentation who want to come here and take it. One of the big things, and I've said this to people at Reform privately, the reason they come, by the way, we can talk about securing our borders, is we are as soft as we give away far too much. But the reason I think it's all changing is that maybe that's not been aware to people. But now people, because social services are, social things are so difficult to attain, be it a doctor or whatever it is, that they're now going, so we pay in and these people are being treated better than us. That's the truth.
I was on a show where the person said, these illegal migrants don't receive any benefits. And I said, free accommodation in hotels is a benefit. I know so many people who'd like free accommodation. That's some of the British people's biggest expense.
And then you get arguments where social housing is given to migrants ahead of the needy in this country. It's ludicrous. Reform will change that, won't it?
100%. You right now, what you have is you have legislation bedded in from the Tories and Labour that say that social housing must go to those most in need, and that has been interpreted as refugees. So when you're an asylum seeker, as soon as that claim is granted, you become a refugee, you go straight to the top of the list. It's maddening. It really is. They've been working it. Our government has been working against us.
What do you make? I'm sorry if I'm going to say the wrong thing. The puberty blockers test on 200 kids is, in my opinion, utterly abhorrent, disgusting, disgraceful and almost criminal. I don't agree with it at all. I'm not ever going to sit here and say people can't be what they be. But when I hear things like that and when I see the way any sort of debate against that or anything else goes, I think I don't know what's happening to the world that I've been in for 60 years, Heather.
I absolutely agree with you, Jeremy. And we do a lot of work in the streets and talking to ordinary people and about sex-based rights and the right for women to, have privacy and dignity and changing rooms and toilets, etc. And overwhelmingly, not one person that we have talked to agrees that it is right to carry out this kind of trial on children. Very interestingly, the general public are very aware of this. They're sometimes not aware of the other elements of this debate, and where we, get into play and talk to them about sex-based rights. But on this issue, they are very aware. So the headlines have been out there. It's covered on the news, on this programme, on many others. and they are very aware that this is going on. And I was very pleased to see the level of public awareness that there has been, but it is absolutely not a vote winner. And Wes Streeting said he's uncomfortable with this, as he should be.
Well, then ban it. Ban it. This is another, I'm not trying to ask you to be political, but another Labour politician that sits on the fence or worries about what a particular focus group might or might not say. I don't care where you come from or your sexuality. I don't give a toss, right? To experiment. The whole thing about kids, and I've got enough of them I should know, is they learn about their sexuality as they go through puberty. To block that, to go against physiology, whatever you want to call it, to me is criminal. And I don't use those words uncalmly. I think it is utterly outrageous. And Streeting opposed it, then allowed it, and now he's saying I've got slight concerns about it. He should have more than concerns. When I watch a government worried about upsetting, you know, somebody if you use hurty words, what about upsetting 200 children's lives forever? Outrageous. Outrageous.
Isn't it? I mean, there are no other words for it. And interestingly, you know, Labour, a lot of Labour MPs have done an about turn on this whole issue. And it brings to mind Anas Sarwar, who's the leader of Scottish Labour, who now says that he would not have supported the GRR, the Gender Recognition Reform Bill in Scotland, because he's learned so much. Now, politicians shouldn't be allowed to carry out these things and this to make these decisions. And this trial that is going ahead, they could change their mind. They could suddenly realise in a year or 2 years that, oh, that wasn't a good thing to do.
Well, can I say this to you as a founder of a women's rights network? And I said this once on a show, and somebody looked at me like I'd landed from Mars. I've got teenage girls, right? One went to school at, I think, 13 or 14 to this new school, and she came. There were 33 new kids, and she came back. Christian knows this story. And within 6 months, she said 11 of them were seeing a school psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, because they weren't sure about their sexuality. Now, I will probably be absolutely destroyed for what I'm about to say. That's rubbish. That's sheep-like B-O-W. You know what word I'm trying to use. I am absolutely with anybody who has that. I've done enough of that in my life and talked to enough people. But if you are talking about something as serious as your sexuality or gender, whatever it is, and you are being led because it's the latest thing, and I genuinely mean, and I think something like this trial merely encourages this. And you said it. What if that happens in 2 years and you don't know that at 8? And the worst thing, and sorry, I really am, because it just affects me as a father, is the kids they've picked from underprivileged backgrounds, some with social and mental needs, who maybe are not in a position from where they've come from or where they're going to make a balanced decision. And finally, what sort of parents allow this to happen to their kids?
Oh, Jeremy, it's the false promise of a sex change that is being made to children. And we know that it is not possible. A sex change is not possible. Sex is real and is not a choice. And we need to be helping children to get through these difficult years of puberty that allows them to develop and grow and help define themselves. This trial seems to be giving some children what they think they want and what adults are supposed.
But this is my point, and you're the person. How does I've got an 8. I mean, how does an 8-year-old know that it might at some point want a sex change? It cannot possibly know that that's what it wants. It hasn't developed, and so the challenge is, by this unbelievably dangerous scheme, are we not pushing people down a certain route?
Of course, we're saying that there is hope. This is a possible thing to do. So let's get you started. Dangerous. And it seems to be being measured on levels of happiness and well-being. Now, your 8-year-old, I'm sure if your 8-year-old wanted an iPad, please let me have an iPad, and you gave them an iPad, they would be much happier. And for maybe a year or 2 years, they would be much happier. But probably in about 10 years' time, they might have thought, oh, I wish I'd had a bicycle. You know, this is...
Honestly, I welcome, this is the one part when people say to me in this office, oh, you're old-fashioned. Yeah, I'm really happy to be. I don't believe we should play with kids psychologically or physically. I think kids should develop as children and learn about their sexuality. And if anybody wants to jump up and down, that's fine. I don't want to be playing science with children's development. I think it's so dangerous. And can I support your network and you know, Sex Matters and all these sorts of groups that are doing absolutely right. And you said it as well. I'll just nail the other one. You know, teenage daughters. I don't want them changing with a bloke in a dress. That you said that Anwar Sanwar, the leader, is now in Scotland saying it was wrong. Let's not forget. A male rapist. I never forget it. I remember doing drive time. A man who raped 2 women puts on a wig. Right, let's be perfectly honest, and a bit of lippy, goes to court and says, I'm a woman, and gets put in a female jail. That is so fundamentally dangerous to women.
Isn't it? And finally, we were being allowed to say these things. It's Wes Streeting said, you know, we shouldn't be silenced.
No. I remember, what was that thing's name from Scotland? Because it came out, honestly, it came out of court, and I've never forgotten it. Came out of court in a pair of pink leggings, and you could see that it was a man from a mile off. I mean, honestly, I'm sorry, I make no apology for that. That was an excuse to go to a cushy jail, but the people that made that decision, I would say, are putting women's rights in danger.
They are. And this whole thing, we're telling children that it's possible to do this. That this is something that might lie in their future. They can change sex. And at the same time, we've got the Supreme Court saying, no, you can't. Sex is biological and cannot be changed. And again, we have no faith in the Labour Party. They're sitting on the guidance following that Supreme Court judgment. They say they support the judgment, but the guidance is not coming out. And employers out there and service providers out there are lost. They are currently being given still incorrect information about the law. And that is absolutely absurd. So I welcome, we shouldn't be silenced. We were for too long. We've been able to speak now for about, you know, it's 18 months or 2 years since we've been able to take this thing into the media and get wider awareness of just the harms that this ideology is proposing. When
I hear, just to finish up, I saw a banner there saying trans rights. I'm just going to say one thing. I'm not getting involved to say this. Kids' rights to develop normally and naturally. Teenage girls' rights. We say a very good morning to a lovely lady, Catherine Porter, independent energy analyst. How are you, Catherine?
Good morning. I'm depressed as well, unfortunately.
What are you depressed about? The fact that Christmas is over? The fact that we've got...
Oh, I wish. No, so I have a big report being launched on Monday talking about whether the grid will cope with the electrification targets that we have. And I essentially conclude that not only will we not cope with any extra demand from electrification or AI, we're going to have to ration electricity if we don't do something about retirement risk in the gas generation fleet. And the prospect that we could lose key offshore gas infrastructure because of the way that the North Sea is being pushed into accelerated decline. This would obviously be extremely expensive and put people's lives at risk. I mean, 11 people died in the Iberian blackout back in April.
I have to tell you,
it's very concerning that people aren't looking at this.
I'm so delighted to have you on, and anybody who quite rightly, in my opinion, makes the energy thing what it is. I don't understand the hypocrisy. I don't understand the economics. I'll say it to you, as I've said to many people, led by Miliband, right? This government that is skint and overseeing a skint country that's paying £120 billion a year in interest on its debts is trying to spend billions by stealing land from farmers, building wind farms that don't create enough electricity, so you have to take it from somewhere else that costs more money and sends bills through the roof. And then even better than that, if it blows too much, it costs even more to either get rid of it or switch those machines off. It's ludicrous, it's stupid, and as somebody once said to me, let's just say this ridiculous target is reached, and by the way, the rest of the world that gets far more into the CO emissions than we do, they don't give a damn. What happens if we reach this net zero target? What happens next? Do we get some sort of bleeding medal? Is there a new target? I think it is utterly, utterly ludicrous, and we're looking there at the sea. We've got liquid gold under our shores. Why don't we drill it and make money and pay our debts off?
Yeah, exactly. And what's even worse is that we're just switching to imports, and imports have higher carbon intensity anyway. So if you're really motivated by dealing with the so-called climate emergency, then you shouldn't be doing what we're doing. We're making energy expensive, so that's offshoring our manufacturing. We're losing 1,000 jobs a month in the North Sea, and we're not reducing our consumption of oil and gas. So the whole thing is just ridiculous.
Yesterday, Leanne,
on the money, so is that. Because they're accelerating the depreciation, the Treasury is going to turn into a net tax payer, because under the decommissioning regime, basically you collect extra taxes from the producers when they're producing, and then you give them some of that money back when they start decommissioning, and that's going to be a couple of £1 billion a year that the Treasury is going to have to start paying back to these companies years earlier than would have been the case otherwise. So it's going to cost us an awful lot of money.
Couldn't agree more. Yesterday, Lee Anderson, who's a hero to me, working class man, Reform MP, stood up and took on Millipede. Have a watch, have a listen.
November last year, the Energy Secretary and his entourage attended COP30 in Brazil. This was an event where a rainforest was chopped down so the Energy Secretary could talk about saving rainforests. Does he understand the hypocrisy of it all?
I don't understand the honourable gentleman, if I'm honest. I mean, look, basically, the truth is he would give up on young people. He would sell them down the river. He'd sell down the river today's generations, future generations, and all the generations to come. I don't think that's a very good platform to stand on.
I'm not quite sure what selling the younger generation down the river's got to do with cutting down the bloody rainforest, Catherine, because Lee Anderson's right, isn't he?
Well, he is. And, you know, the ridiculous thing here is that you've got people like Ed Miliband going on and on about how we're going to have all this climate leadership. To be a leader, you need people willing to follow, and absolutely nobody is following us. They're just laughing at us.
Yeah.
We're destroying our economy, we're destroying our opportunities, and we're not actually moving the dial on climate either. Yeah. So the whole thing is just really damaging and pointless.
Do you know what I get really angry about when they all go, everybody's concerned about the climate? Yes, if you ask people, they'll say, of course I'm concerned about the climate, but it's a bit like, you won't have been involved, but the drink driving thing earlier. Yes, important, but there are massive, massive issues in the United Kingdom right now, socially, economically, politically, financially, and we are in no position, I don't think, to bankrupt ourselves on the altar of an ideology that doesn't, frankly, make any sense at all, does it? Doesn't.
No, and the stuff that we're doing doesn't actually reduce emissions. We're making emissions worse by the policies that we're engaging in. But also, I think there's a big thing here where the public needs to be re-educated a little bit about oil and gas, because we hear a lot about it in terms of energy, but then you get these people saying, well, let's just stop oil. Well, almost everything in a hospital, apart from people, is made out of oil. Almost every medication that we use in the NHS is made out of oil. Most of the medical equipment is made out of oil. Most of what you need in technology relies on oil. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. We'd have no social media without oil. Agriculture would collapse without natural gas. Sri Lanka tried to ban synthetic fertiliser a couple of years ago. And they went from being a net exporter of rice to having food riots because they couldn't feed their own people and had to have an IMF bailout. It was one of the fastest economic collapses in history. This stuff is absolutely fundamental to our lives.
Just to put a bit of a detail for people who perhaps didn't hear yesterday's show, they sort of announced, the government summarily yesterday, that they wanted to attack drink driving, and we all support that. They wanted to bring the limit down to a pint instead of 2. A couple of reactions from the people that watch and listen talk. One was, this is more nanny state stuff, surely we can make our own minds up, blah, blah, blah. The other thing was the attack this poses on pubs, certainly in rural communities, pubs that have been decimated, Ross, as you know, by national insurance increases, many small businesses suffering across this country. And it sort of led to this belief that Labour does indeed hate the British pub so much. Great article on it today. How do you sum it up?
Well, pubs are facing a sort of maelstrom of increases in taxes and other costs. The worst thing for many of them is the business rates. Business rates were, well, they were punishing before the COVID pandemic, but then during the pandemic, the then Conservative government sort of cut the business rates, gave them a tax break. That has now been removed by Labour, with the result that some pubs are facing a doubling of their business rates to sort of over 100,000 in some cases. I mean, that is a vast extra burden. And of course, they're not, let's say, the same businesses they were before the pandemic. They're not necessarily as profitable. It's not just taxes which are killing off pubs. Young people are drinking less and so on, changing tastes, and more people perhaps going to city centre establishments rather than those in the suburbs and villages. But even so, I mean, the tax system ought to take that into account. And if a business is less profitable than it used to be because of changing tastes, well, then the tax bill will fall. But of course, in this case, business rates are simply being assessed on, the profitability of those businesses in the past, which is not helping them at all.
I couldn't agree more. I guess my point is, I mean, I think you could make that argument. Oh, look, there's an interesting, if you are watching on YouTube, something I said last night, it's very interesting, isn't it? Look, there's 3 Labour MPs in a pub. One of the things that's quite interesting, Ross, is that so angry are landlords that they've been banning Labour MPs from their local pubs because of what they've done to the business. But the issue of your article, the headline which sort of drew me to it, was we know that Labour's NI increases have attacked small businesses across this country. In fact, that lie when they came to power, it's all about growth, it's all about the working man, but that's turned out to be false. But why is it, do you think, that they seem to hate the pub so much? We've had the smoking ban, we've had all those sorts of things. There are people that listen to this who text and say they're against it. It's the hub of the community. People go there to discuss. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, Labour to me seems to have completely lost its sort of community bearings. It doesn't really care about communities so much now. It's the left, and Labour in particular, have become a sort of amalgamation of activist groups, special interests, pressure groups, and so on. And they've rather lost this, community spirit. I mean, go back a half a century, and the tap room of your local would have been a thoroughly Labour constituency of working people just out there to enjoy themselves, spend a bit of their money. And now Labour don't seem to care about that at all. And
it's a really interesting point, because I was up in Newcastle some weeks ago, and of course this is a working person's area, right? God's country, working men, right, and women. And actually, everybody that I spoke to, speaking to a paramedic at a football match, and he was saying, was brought up, my dad voted Labour, my granddad voted Labour. There's a title in the clue of the party, Labour Party. He said none of us would vote for them now. They're London-centric. They don't understand the working man or woman. That joke about they're based in Islington, I agree. That red wall that seems to be captured, be it by the Tories last time, obviously, because they were so incompetent Labour, but I think the working man and woman's being failed. I think they've completely lost sight of who they were set up to look after and protect.
Yes, they've sort of declared war on the working man.
Yeah.
At the same time, they also have their guns on the small businesses. What Lenin would have called the gulag classes, people who own, a bit of property, own a small business. And if Labour talk to businesses at all, it tends to be to the large ones which want their smaller competitors extinguished because it's more profitable for them. And it is very telling that the one cabinet minister who seems to be pushing back on the business rate rises is Peter Kyle, the business secretary. And he's the one who does have some business experience. He worked for the Body Shop, and a sort of very left-leaning business, but a business nonetheless. And all the others, they seem to be brought up in this cosseted world.
Never done a job.
Public sector, where you don't worry about your salary, don't worry about job security, don't worry about the security of your pension. You're looked after by the state, and this government is, almost wholly serving that class of people, the public sector classes, and everybody else, it seems, can go to hell.
And it's interesting, actually, because we were talking this morning about how the latest opinion polls, and you go, well, who are the 20% that are still voting for this, allegedly, if you look at opinion polls, for this bunch of people who have proven themselves to be so utterly useless, with no business experience. When you look at that front bench, Ross, you're right, and you come to the conclusion that it is the public service workers and the train drivers and all those people, the junior doctors that got 30% and want another 30%. Listen, it's a really, really interesting article, and and it does beg to ask so many questions. But one of the things that actually Mel Stride was talking about, the Shadow Chancellor, who was on the show this morning, was that as we get nearer to an election, the one thing the Tories will talk about repeatedly is the economy, is cost of living, is people's rights, but basic finances and making things work, because screwing businesses, small businesses like pubs, as they are doing, has a really, really detrimental impact.
Before I get started, I really want to pick up on what the contributor said about the PC of days gone by when they were smartly turned out. Now, I understand it is difficult for police to look smart these days in high-vis and a stab vest. That's very challenging, although more could be done to make them look presentable. But you know why people also respected the police back in those days? Because they patrolled on their own. They were vulnerable. Yeah. The public knew it, and the public thought to themselves, I'm very grateful that man or woman is doing that job, because I wouldn't want to do it. And that was why there was so much respect. Now they hunt in packs, and people go, pfft.
Oh, has he gone? Are you still
No,
there?
I'm still here.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't even see it. No, I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about this main news story, Pete, because to me this sums up where we're at. Today it's reported in almost every newspaper Scotland Yard failed to properly vet thousands of officers. This included racists, rapists and violent offenders as they rushed around trying to create 20,000 new officers, but at the same time, literally to tick boxes. The two serial rapists are among more than 130 officers and staff let in due to vetting failures who have gone on to commit crimes and misconduct. And for people to understand the importance of this madness, this was after Wayne Couzens, after David Keir, after all of that, right? Secretly, up to 6 forces dropped employment checks. What the hell do they expect the British people to think?
And this is the ridiculous decision-making of very senior police officers. And are they being held accountable today? Are they being named? Are they being shamed? Are they being bounced out of policing because they're obviously stupid? No, they're not. They're still in their very well-paid jobs. And not only did the rapists and the paedophiles and all the others get into policing, but some people deliberately went into policing and they were members of organised crime gangs. And they went in so that they could access databases, intelligence files and the such like. The public demand and expect police officers to be legit, to be straight. And this idiotic bunch of senior police officers let absolute vermin into their ranks.
It's just extraordinary. So we've got this appalling story about, employment checks dropped, and we talk about the belief in the police. And there's that story. Is it Guildford, the chief constable in Birmingham, isn't it? Mark Guildford, I think. Craig Guildford, right? Craig Guildford. This is the man who blatantly lied and lied and lied about the impact of the Maccabi Tel Aviv Football Club's fans because he was trying to protect the Muslim community, presumably, who weren't happy about a Jewish-based Israeli team coming to play Aston Villa some months ago. He has lied and lied and lied. Yet there's no chance, it seems, of him being sacked or looked at or dealt with any more than Sir Mark Rowley. I just, as an ex-copper, and I know this really upsets you and affects you, it breaks your heart, I know this, doesn't it, my friend, when a lot of people are now saying don't trust the police, think the police are rubbish, don't trust them. What's the point? Don't call because they're not going to turn up. I can write an article and they'll arrest me with 6 armed officers, but you know what? If I'm being stabbed or I'm having my shop ransacked, nobody gives a toss anymore, so why should I respect them?
These clowns that are senior police officers these days repeatedly fail upwards. They get things wrong, they get promoted. They get another thing wrong, they get promoted again. And look at those 4 who sat this week in front of that parliamentary committee. What a cabal of clowns.
Yeah.
No wonder the public look at them and go, you expect me to respect the police when you've got lying, conniving, scheming people like that? No chance. And just to pick you up on one thing, if I may, please, Craig Guildford didn't lie to protect Muslims. Craig Guildford lied because he was afraid of taking them on.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the videos at the time saying that there was a Muslim video I remember us putting out on I think it was Drive Time, actually, which said, if you come to this city, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other. I'm not trying to make it about that, but there is something to be said. I mean, do you remember... We talked about this before. Maybe a couple of years ago, I interviewed that senior police officer that was doing looking into the child abuse cases in Rotherham, and he went, yeah, I know it's taken us 8 years, but we didn't want to stoke up social division. Oh, right, OK, so you're pandering. In my day, Pete, certainly in your days, watching the Sweeney and all that stuff, you know, you felt the long arm of the law, you were scared of the law. The law had a meaning, and I just think it's part also, without getting too deep, of yet more fabric in this country breaking down, because for me that was the most important thing. It was always the most important thing. You could rely on a copper to come to your aid or at least see your side of the argument, but not anymore, mate. I'm genuine. I'm forget being a woman. What about women's safety? I wouldn't trust the police at the moment, and that's a terrible thing to say. I really wouldn't. Sorry. Fact.
And it grieves me to hear that. But, you know, policing is not a popularity contest.
No.
Right? It never has been. And
quite right.
In fact, as a police officer, you should be mightily proud of the fact that you're extremely unpopular with criminals and people who want to take weapons out onto the street and the such like. There's only two communities that the police really need to engage with, because everything else will take care of itself. The first community, victims of crime. The second community, perpetrators of crime.
Yeah.
Sort those two sets of people out, one in the right way and the other way in a forceful way, and policing will be sorted overnight.
So listen, big news, you're out, you're off. The live tour starts tonight. It's Bromley, isn't it?
It is, thank you. The Churchill Theatre at Bromley, the first of 142 theatre shows that I'm doing this year. Go to entertainers.co.uk. You'll find a theatre near you where I'm presenting my one-man show, and it'll be a joy to meet you all after the show.
Am I getting free tickets or what?
Speak to me after you come off air.
It's absolutely outrageous that I have to beg. Final question for you. How old are you, Peter Bletchley?
Thank you very much. I'm 66.
I'm 60, and I've got this for you just specifically before you go. It's a great story from Ryan. Over 60s ignite a creative boom. Brits in their 60s and 70s are ditching the armchair for art, craft and new skills. 2/3 say they're more creative now than when they were younger. From gardening to painting, creativity is boosting confidence and well-being. And experts say there's no expiry date on creativity, and the more you do, the longer you'll live, which means if you do 160 dates this year, you'll probably outlive me.
Well, who knows? But, of course, being creative can include writing interesting, gripping, exciting theatre shows, and that's exactly what I've done.
Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll, we bow down to your brilliance. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Yes, I'm good, thank you.
Good God, it's busy this morning, man.
It is. It's a day.
It is a day. Now, the thing we've sort of talked before. You're one of the few pollsters that I like talking to, because you're always quite straight. A lot of them are very set in what they think is going to happen. I don't know how many polls it is, but the latest opinion poll, I think, is number 160 or something, that puts Reform in the lead. This time as well, Labour third, Tories climbing a little bit. Couple of points that I wanted to ask you. There has been a little Reform drop-off. There has been a little bit of a Tory increase. Labour collapsing, and Hypno Boobs, as I call him, Zach Polanski, what's happening with the Greens? All of those questions, all in one, my friend.
Yes, so what it's really important to think about is not individual polls, but instead the long-term trend, which is what you've talked about, but not talking about the number of polls, but the amount of time that those trends have lasted for. And it's since May, really, since the local elections, that Reform have been ahead in every single published poll. And certainly the long-term trend is one of a lead between sort of 7 to 10 points, depending on which polls you look at. More recently, however, there has been a slight drop-off in Reform in those long-term trends, and that, at least so far, appears to be benefiting the Conservatives.
Why is that? Is that just Badenoch's grabbed the nettle, do we think? Do you think it's... What do you think?
Well, it's unlikely to be just one thing, and instead a combination of a number of them. Obviously, Kemi Badenoch is an important part of the Conservative Party's story, for good or bad, and she has improved her situation
I interviewed her the other day.
over the last over the last few months. She's still in a situation where 1 in 5 people actually doesn't know whether she's doing a good or a bad job at all, which is an issue for her. But
would it be fair to say to you as a pollster that she reminds me, I'm afraid, very much of William Hague, probably the right leader at the wrong time? If you were asking me as a voter, I would say that even if I started to warm to Tory policies, right, they need to serve what I call their penance for allowing this bunch of whatevers to be in power, but also for all the lies and mistakes that they made. I think a lot of people out there that you would poll would probably agree with that sentiment.
There's a really good argument to say she's a great Conservative leader for 2010, not for 2026, which is. But of course, you can't choose your era. It's just the situation you have. Labour have consistently been really neck and neck with the Tories now for a number of months. Essentially, it's statistically insignificant, the difference between the two. In other words, they're neck and neck. And then you have the rise of the Greens, which has occurred since the selection of Zach Polansky as leader. And so now you have a situation where Reform are falling back slightly, and then below them, 6, 7, 8 points behind, are not just Labour and Conservatives, but Lib Dems and Greens as well.
What are the Lib Dems at? Another non-entity.
Well, they're on similar numbers in some polls as well, 15, 16%.
And of course, for Nigel Farage and for Reform and for leading yes in 161 polls, the reality is that many people in Reform, and in fact many people in the country, and this I guess is the argument, this is what the man needs to do in the next 3 years with his team, is to make sure that the establishment, as I call it, Labour and Polansky and the Lib Dems, that there is an answer to them doing anything possible to stop him getting into 10 Downing Street. Do any of your trends show you that he can do this on his own? Because there's been murmurings of, you'll need to go with the Tories and they both say yes and they both say no, or whatever they say, it doesn't matter. I know that Nigel Farage would want to become Prime Minister with a working majority. Anything in the polls that show that?
Well, Zach Polansky, firstly, I think would argue that he's certainly not part of the establishment. But that's an important point, the sort of...
No, I'm talking about the establishment, the mass media, whoever you want to talk about it.
Reform versus anti-reform, I think, is the way to look at it. And when you look at the polling, actually, one interpretation of it is it's actually good news for Nigel Farage and Reform, because in a situation where you have a 4-5 party race in individual constituencies, or even a 6-party race in Scotland or in Wales with Plaid and the SNP, you could have a situation where you only need 20-25% of the vote to win in the constituency.
I agree. And actually the argument against why, or rather for the uniparty thing that's always worked, is I remember when the SDP started out and when the Liberal Democrats, they'd end up with 10,000 votes in every constituency, sometimes 20, lots of seconds, lots of consistent support, but never the Tories, south of Watford Gap will get 60,000 in each constituency and win 350 seats, and north of Watford Gap will get nothing, and it didn't matter because that's how the vote panned out. Reform, I'm thinking, probably, and the Greens, I don't want to get involved, would probably have consistent support in all constituencies across the UK.
Well, it's certainly true for a number of constituencies, but there is still variation. First past the post hurts parties until it really doesn't, and then it helps them. But it's worth pointing out that the SDP that you mentioned, in the early 1980s, they were on more than 50% of the vote in some polls, and 9 years later getting beaten by the monster raving loony party in a by-election.
Do you genuinely believe that Nigel Farage and Reform can win an overall majority at the next election?
They certainly can, but we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3.5 years. It's within the last 3.5 years that Boris Johnson was talking about his plans for a third term. So an awful lot can happen.
And it was only, 18 months ago that Keir Starmer walked into Downing Street with the biggest post-war majority, and look what's happened there. It's actually a paper majority, because I think he's in trouble.
We can speculate about routes for Nigel Farage to become Prime Minister. We can speculate for routes for Reform to completely collapse. But it is just that, speculation. Polling is only ever a snapshot of where we are at the moment.
When you're out in the street or when you're doing your polling, what are people saying about the Prime Minister? Is that a recoverable position by Labour, do you think?
Well, if the last 10 or 15 years of British politics have taught us anything, it's that nothing can be ruled out, but also nothing can be guaranteed. So can it be recovered? Yes, but every day that goes past and the Prime Minister and the government's position does not improve, it makes it more difficult and less likely that it will improve.
There was a story in the newspaper today. I mean, I made light of it. It's frightening. Most 12-year-olds do not realise that they will be able to vote in the next election. This research said they hold strong views. Other 12-year-olds, they don't. They want to play the PlayStation. What are you talking about? I don't know what you feel as a pollster. dropping the age to 16. People who are 12 right now could pick our next Prime Minister. It's too young, isn't it?
Well, people who are 12 inevitably would have picked up next Prime Minister in 6 years as well. And you could argue that they're not paying attention now, but they don't need to pay attention now because they're not going to be voting until they're 16.
But I mean, I'm talking about the ones that will be 16 straight away, and then within a day or two they can vote in a general election.
I think there's strong arguments for and against it. Yeah, I do think there are. But I think whatever happens, it has to be accompanied by serious efforts within schools to inform people.
Oh, we're going to have an argument now.
Because
our schools are utterly, utterly, utterly run by many people who have a complete objective, which is, and I'm not just saying this, but left of centre. We know that.
I think the situation is more complicated. Not all schools.
Not all schools at all.
But I stress there should be an important move from schools to inform people of their responsibility to vote, because there's a lot of evidence that if you don't vote in the first opportunity you're given, you then, if you like, don't get into the habit.
I think it's a really interesting point that you've made, actually, because whether there's responsibility on schools or parents or whatever, parents should take a responsibility as well. One of my real pet hates is people who moan and bitch and quite rightly get upset by government decisions, and then you find out they didn't vote. I believe that exercising your democratic right is probably the most important thing that we have. And one thing I was going to say to you is, one thing I do feel very strongly about is the silent majority who for years have accepted many things, whatever their politics, have worked out that their vote and their voice can be important and can be used.
Yeah, and that's very important to the health of any democracy, that people do exercise their vote. And obviously people have a right not to vote as well, but if they choose not to vote, they must accept the consequences that
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? Everybody moans about Sadiq Khan, me the most, but 1 million people in London voted in the last mayoral election, and 11.8 million people live here. People just didn't come out. So if you're going to come out, vote as you want to vote. That's your democratic right. But don't sort of carp from the sidelines in the end if it doesn't work out. Prediction time. I know you're 3 years away. Look, he doesn't like this at all, Joe, does he? Does Nigel Farage enter Downing Street in 3 years? In your opinion as a pollster?
Well, no, I can't give you my opinion as a pollster because polls are not a prediction.
All right. What about your opinion as a...
I think at the moment it's the most likely outcome, but it is by no means guaranteed.
Polls? Do you do polls amongst MPs, or is it just?
We don't, but
does Keir Starmer survive the next 12 months?
I think, again, not the most likely outcome, but I can certainly see perfectly reasonable reasons for why he does. I think the May local elections will be hugely important.
And what's polling saying about May? Is it you doing polling?
Well, because it's only a specific set of constituencies, it's difficult. But Scotland and Wales clearly present a serious challenge for Labour.
Scotland and Wales, of course, they're holding the Senate and the Scottish Parliament's elections, so that's would-be MPs. I don't think Reform will win Scotland. It will be to come second and oust Labour to the SNP. But then the SNP had a terrible, terrible time, didn't it, with the problems of Nicola Sturgeon and motor caravans and money in the garden.
But as lots of different parties have shown, whether it's the Greens, whether it's Reform, or whether it's the SNP, your performance in individual areas, even whole nations, or councils or particular constituencies, doesn't necessarily impact on your vote when it comes to elections.
It must be fascinating what you do, actually, when you cut it all down. Do you find it must be interesting to see how all these... You can tell, can you? As what I always find really astonishing. I remember watching Julia on the night of the election, and they do that prediction at 10 o'clock, and I've watched it for years, and it always turns out to be incredibly accurate before they've even counted the votes. It fascinates me how it works, because many pollsters get things absolutely spot on. Some don't by a mile, but more often than not, the polls are very accurate.
Well, there's always a margin of error associated with every poll, and you can't abolish that because it's to do with the laws of probability, and you can't abolish those in the way you can't abolish the laws of gravity. But generally speaking, in this country, within that margin of error, polling has been relatively accurate compared to actual outcomes. But as I say, the polling at the moment is not a prediction of where we will be in 3.5 years. It's a representation of where we are at the moment.